So good to see you all. And thank you to all the spectacular leaders in this room for being here at this moment. It's nice to see you all. And I hope you're having a fabulous end to the summer. It is such an important time, and we have so much work to do in Minnesota. I hardly have to tell you that, right? Because you're all already engaged and doing it. But I think if you've been watching the primary elections over the past couple of weeks, and even in Minnesota, we are turning out the vote, and women are turning out this vote in phenomenal numbers. Nothing shows us what is at stake more than what we already know in our own hearts. And so I think women coming together, gathering together and saying, here we are, and we are ready to be the state that protects reproductive freedoms in every single way, as we always have been. But unfortunately, there are so many states surrounding us that cannot say the same thing, and in our country at this moment. And as long as you have Tim and Peggy in office, that is a non-negotiable. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that as a mom, as a friend, as a woman. And I think I cannot quite believe the state of our country. But thank God for Minnesota, and thank God for all of you, and for what we have established here, worked hard for, and are ready to fight for. Some people have said, oh, this is like the 1950s. And then others have clarified, no, this is like the 1850s. And we are not ready to give up any of our independence, any of our autonomy. And sovereignty is a very powerful thing. And so I think you are all gathering together on your own will and your own power. And I'm ready to stand with you, work with you to reelect Tim and Peggy, and to protect reproductive rights in Minnesota. This will not stand in our country, I believe, and and our state is going to show the way forward. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you are doing. Thank you for your leadership, for your commitment, and for being great Minnesota women who I've learned so much with, and I look forward to working in this election.
Greetings from my kitchen. I am so excited to be here with all of you virtually. I'm ready to rock. I've got my 1973 earrings on. I have earrings for all occasions, and this is no different, that we have to be able to show up and show out in every way that we can for reproductive justice. I got my sign to make it abundantly clear that we will not roll back reproductive rights while Tim Walz and I are in office. And we've got all of you who are here ready to fight with us, alongside us, to make sure that our access to abortion is protected. And that is what this really is all about, knowing we truly believe in the idea of one Minnesota. It's not just a catchphrase. It's not just something, right, that we think fits on a bumper sticker. It is truly who we are and what we believe. And there couldn't be an issue, I think, that is more clear about the need to have one Minnesota than all of us standing together to ensure that we can make sure that for future generations, we have access to health care that everybody needs. This moment is unlike any in history. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I cannot believe that we can live in a time when my 9-year-old daughter will have fewer rights than I do as her mother, but especially than her grandmother did. But here's what I know. When the Dobbs decision came down, my mom and I got on the phone, and she said, I've prepared you for this moment your whole life, which is exactly true. My mom raised me to fight for my rights and the rights of others. works. And I know that there are people who are part of this conversation and part of this Zoom across the state of Minnesota who have fought this fight before, but you are ready to fight this fight once again. And I know what an honor it is to be in this fight with all of you. Our opponent, Scott Jensen, has made it incredibly clear that there couldn't even be more of a contrast between Tim Walz and Scott Jensen than on this particular issue. Both Scott Jensen and Matt Birk have said that they will ban abortion without exception. And that, in my opinion, is unacceptable and not who we are as Minnesotans, and we will not go backwards. One of my favorite things about Tim Walz is that he listens to women. In fact, he surrounds himself with women who are giving him advice and who he listens to. And I don't know, hot tip for Scott Jensen, maybe he should be listening to more women because I think he might be a better leader. The other thing that I would say is that we've also heard what my opponent, Matt Birk, has said about this issue. His comments after the Dobbs decision came out were appalling, saying that, somehow abortion encourages women to have careers, right? And to be professional. I can't even begin to comment on how offensive that is to all of us. And I had to check my calendar to see that it was 2022 and not 1952 after he made those comments. But here's the deal. Those comments are bad, but the policy is even worse. Denying survivors of rape the ability to terminate their pregnancy, denying victims of incest the ability to terminate their pregnancy is completely ghoulish and unacceptable. And we are going to make sure that we win, because this is not what we are going to do in Minnesota. And here's another hot tip for Matt Birk, which is that women make up 51% of our workforce in the state. We have the highest participation of women in the workforce than any other state in the country. I think that's a good thing and something we need to continue to encourage with policies that back it up, like paid family leave, childcare, and making sure that every person has an opportunity to succeed with every level of education. And I know that every election cycle you hear, this is the most important election of our time, right? But legitimately this year, that is true. This is the most important election, certainly in my lifetime, where we cannot afford to have these two dangerous candidates who want to ban abortion, who disrespect survivors of sexual assault, and who question whether or not women should pursue careers. So the good news is we will fight. And this is something that Governor Tim Walz and Congressman Tim Walz and teacher Tim Walz and coach Tim Walz have been fighting for his entire career, making sure that people are seen and heard and valued and protected and believed. And for those of us who are moms who grew up under the safety of Roe, this is about our daughters. This is about our young people. And I know that Governor Walz is never going to give up this fight, and I will never give up this fight while we are in office. We cannot do this alone. We need you in November. And if our folks turn out, we win. So I need you to talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, people at the grocery store. Get outside of your Minnesota comfort zone, because this election is simply too important. We are going to show up in November. We are going to reject extremism, and we must ensure that Democrats are elected up and down the ballot who are going to protect our access to reproductive rights and reproductive justice. And that means that we are going to keep the House. We're going to expand our margin a little bit. We're going to win back the Senate. We are going to re-elect Steve Simon and Julie Blaha and Keith Ellison and Governor Walz and myself, because we have more work to do. And I know that this works. I grew up in the Wellstone for Senate campaign, and what I learned is that field, calling people, knocking on doors, having conversations with people who trust you, that is the way to change hearts and minds and get people to turn out. So we have 76 days I think, but who's counting? I'm totally counting. To make sure that we are turning people out across the state for the kind of place that, frankly, we are an island in the Midwest, of being able to live someplace where people are protected, where we have access to reproductive health care, where we have folks who want to invest and fully fund education. The choice is very, very clear. Minnesotans are better when we work together, and we are really good at it. So let's be the best of who we are and show up for each other. We can show up in Detroit Lakes for folks who live in Mankato. We can show up on the range for people who live in Worthington. And that is how we get this done. We are truly one Minnesota. The governor and I are honored and humbled to be able to represent you. But more than anything, we are honored and humbled to be able to be organizers in this fight with you to make sure that we are protecting our rights for everyone. We're going to reject the politics of hate and division and say, in Minnesota, we take care of each other. We show up for each other. And I just really appreciate you giving of your time, and I'm ready to win. And I know that you are too. So Chi-miigwech, thank you so much for everything you have done. And thank you for everything that you will do to ensure that we all collectively win in November.
I have to say, I am so incredibly proud to live in a state where Peggy Flanagan is lieutenant governor. I'm happy every day to know that she's out there fighting for all of our families. And it is a pleasure to go into work every day and to know that I've got a partner making that happen. And a first lady who is undaunted. The challenge gets bigger, she grows to the challenge. And for some of you maybe heard the story when the first lady went to the Capitol when we were first elected to make the case for common sense gun laws to protect our children in schools. And the Republican senators thought that that was just unseemly for a first lady to get involved in politics. And they called me up and asked me to have a talk with her. When I got done laughing, I said, please come over. I want to watch that conversation you have with the first lady. So we've got fighters on our side. And I have to say to each of you, it lifts my soul to see you all out there. I think it's important for all of us to remember, none of us are in this alone. We're not in it alone in this fight to craft a Minnesota that we know and love, that makes sure that everyone is seen, heard, valued, and that women are listened to, and that we protect their right to make their own choices. It's an opportunity that you don't get that often. As you heard, we keep wondering where we're at in time. Well, we are in a moment in time that history is going to reflect on who were those who stood up and did the right thing, stood up for women, stood up for the right to vote, stood up for our democracy at a time like this. And I think for all of you to see you come out on a night like this, to see you gather and believe in our democracy, this is a time to bring this democracy back better than it ever was before, making sure everyone can participate, making sure we put the things in place to protect those, especially those less vulnerable. So I have to tell you, I look forward to this fight. I look forward to it because it brings us in contact with Minnesotans who love this state with everything they have. And this afternoon, we were with a group of those very people who love this state with their very heart. They happen to be a bunch of young immigrant dreamers. They might not be documented, but I will guarantee you they are putting everything they have into making this state better. They are in college, they are college graduates, they are organizers, they're fighting for healthier, they're fighting for women, and they see their future in Minnesota. So we know what's at stake. And many of you have heard me use the line, and I'll say it again. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but our recital is here and the choir needs to sing. It's a simple fact that the Lieutenant Governor said, and it's up to us to make it happen. If Minnesotans vote, progressives win. If Minnesotans vote, we win. If Minnesotans vote, our children win. Our schools are funded. People are protected. So I have to tell you, we've got work to do. Peggy, I, Gwen, and our team are committed to building the strongest campaign you've seen. We will have organizers in every corner of the state. We have been up on the air, on TV, on radio, on social media longer than any campaign, and we're just getting started. And then in about 12 hours, we'll walk through the gates of the Great Minnesota Get Together and take our message to Minnesotans from all over at the state fair. So I have to tell you, to the organizers who opened their homes, their backyards, thank you. Thank you for believing in Minnesota. You know what we can do together. And I just can't tell you, getting the opportunity for Peggy, I, this team, and all of you to keep moving Minnesota forward is the greatest privilege, and to tell you the greatest excitement I can feel about what the next 4 years bring.